Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. Man, the world is changing fast. We say that often because it's true. It's kaleidoscopic. Every morning you wake up in a brand new country. And it's hard to keep track of the change because there are so few mile markers. But here's one measure of the change. It was less than a year ago that millions of us gathered around our electronic hearths in anticipation of Andrew Cuomo receiving a coveted Emmy Award. You remember that night? Even by the standards of fraudulent Hollywood ceremonies, it was a very weird moment. As a rule, politicians do not accept Emmy Awards. That would require admitting that they're actors. But Andrew Cuomo, postmodern as he is, had no problem with that. He's been playing a character from The Godfather for decades. So he took it. Here are the highlight clips they played as Andrew Cuomo received his statuette.
Flatten the curve, flatten the curve, flatten the curve. We talk about social distancing. Slow the spread. New York has been getting the short end of the stick from this federal government from day one right across the board. Let's stop, just for one moment, the partisanship.
Flatten the curve, flatten the curve, flatten the curve. It's iconic. It's like, go ahead and make my day, or may the force be with you. We'll never forget it. It will live on forever in our common culture. And so you can see why Andrew Cuomo won Best Performance by a sitting governor. Such passion, such intensity. The delivery seemed almost lifelike in its sincerity and force. Talk about method acting. For a second, you could almost imagine Andrew Cuomo running a large American state, sitting in his office in the Capitol building, making complex policy decisions about whatever they make complex policy decisions about, barking urgent orders to aides like a governor. It was a remarkable performance. In fact, looking back, that night at the Emmys last November was the apogee of Andrew Cuomo's career. And he could have lived on it for years, dining out, mining the memories of his heyday, playing progressively smaller venues, doing an annual fan show in San Diego. But he chose not to. Andrew Cuomo is wiser than that. He's bigger. He remembers well what happened to Marlon Brando when the Godfather series ended, the long decline. So today, Andrew Cuomo quit the business. He left at the top of his game. Here's his announcement.
Wasting energy on distractions is the last thing that state government should be doing. And I cannot be the cause of that. New York tough means New York loving. And I love New York. And I love you. And everything I have ever done has been motivated by that love. And I would never want to be unhelpful in any way. And I think that given the circumstances, the best way I can help now is if I step aside and let government get back to governing.
He's so tough, he's running away. He's so tough, he's quitting. We've heard that claim a lot recently. And you know, watching that tape, it is possible that we have sold Andrew Cuomo short. We told you his Emmy in November was the high point of his career, but in fact, what you just saw may have been the single greatest performance of his life. I'm resigning, he said, not because I killed all those old people in nursing homes, no. Not because my closest advisor went to federal prison for corruption. Nothing to do with it. Not because I've got a super creepy personal life, and by the way, it's entirely possible I am a made member of the mafia. No, not at all. I'm resigning from my job because I love the state of New York. And ladies and gentlemen, that's what love does. It resigns. Pretty remarkable, really. Could Al Pacino have delivered those lines with a straight face? No, not a chance. But instead of enjoying it, the media missed it. Naturally, they missed the art of it entirely. They bought the whole thing. They took it seriously. They thought it was real. Today, they're telling you that Andrew Cuomo's resignation is a watershed moment. It's a win for the Me Too movement. It's a somber reminder of the systemic misogyny that surrounds us. On CNN, they got completely carried away, as they often do. One particularly self-hating male anchor, is there any other kind over there, was so awestruck by Andrew Cuomo's speech that he immediately yielded the floor to the ladies, to his female colleagues. It would be wrong, he said, for a man to weigh in on news this grave. That's how toxic Andrew Cuomo is. Andrew Cuomo is a living embarrassment to men everywhere, even the news readers who periodically identify as men on CNN. That's what they're telling you. Now, far be it for us on this show to defend Andrew Cuomo. He is awful. We've said that for years, and we haven't changed our view. But still, since this is playing out in public, it might be worth asking a couple of obvious questions before we move on to the next victim. For example, if Andrew Cuomo was harassing so many women and doing it at the state capitol in New York, how come we just learned he was doing it? Andrew Cuomo has been in office for almost 11 years. Lots of people say now that they knew he was a creep. So why didn't they tell us before? They certainly didn't. Instead, they told us Andrew Cuomo was godlike. Do you remember that? In case you don't remember it, we have the tape.
Governor Cuomo out there day after day after day, everything Trump isn't, honest, direct, brave.
Even lifelong Republicans tell me, they look at Cuomo and they're like, God, there's a leader.
For those of you who've been wondering why New York Governor Andrew Cuomo has been garnering the nickname America's Governor, I think you saw it right there. He is conveying incredible strength in the face of this pandemic.
Maybe Trump is just a little bit mad that Governor Cuomo has become a kind of acting president.
I hope you are able to appreciate what you did in your state and what it means for the rest of the country now, and what it will always mean to those who love and care about you the most.
Turns out noted feminist icon Joe Scarborough liked the cut of Andrew Cuomo's jib. And honestly, that should have been a tip right there. The race lady was a fan, too. In retrospect, those were pretty clear signs. We should have picked him up. But here's the most obvious sign. America's most prolific hair sniffer was a massive fan of Andrew Cuomo's. I mean, of course he was. These guys all know each other.
Your governor of New York's done one hell of a job. I think he's sort of the gold standard. I mean, look at the way you have governors like Cuomo who are out there just keeping everybody informed all day. I think he's doing an incredible job. I think he has been the lead horse here. I've talked to him frequently. He's a friend. I think he's doing a great job. I really mean it.
He's the gold standard. He's doing a great job. He's a friend. I really mean it. And you know, they all meant it until just about, in fact, precisely December of 2020. That's when a candidate for Manhattan Bureau President, a woman called Lindsay Boylan, wrote a Twitter thread that accused Andrew Cuomo of, quote, harassing her. Sex harassment. The crime, according to Boylan, occurred more than 2 years earlier in 2018, but we hadn't heard about it. So here's the first question. Why did Lindsay Boylan wait 2 years to tell us what had happened? This guy is the governor of one of the most important states in the country. So why didn't she pipe up before, say, before the Emmy Awards? Now, we can't know the answer to that, but it's clear that she picked a politically significant moment to share her allegations on Twitter. Lindsay Boylan went public almost immediately after the news media called the presidential race for Joe Biden. Oh. Could it be that the second that call was made, Andrew Cuomo had outlived his usefulness, and it might be time to crush him and move on to someone who's easier to control? Now, if you think that's a conspiracy theory, you don't live in New York, where that kind of thinking is common. The state of New York has a long history of palace coups, and many of them, a disturbingly large number, originated in the Attorney General's office. In fact, Andrew Cuomo once did it. He was the Attorney General of New York. Remember that? He used his office to investigate his boss at the time, Eliot Spitzer, the guy who wore black socks, all coming back to you. And then he became governor. Oh, so this is the kind of thing that happens in New York. That's not exactly democracy. It's like late Ottoman, but it's very common there. Could it be that's what's happening now? Well, let's see. The current Attorney General of New York is a woman called Letitia James. Now, James does not hide her own political ambitions because you no longer have to. Nobody cares. Earlier this year, she said that AG, you thought it meant Attorney General. No, actually, she said it stands for aspiring governor, which she is. Even before she was elected to her current office, which she has misused from day one, James vowed to start a political investigation into Donald Trump's businesses in New York, not because she had specific evidence they had broken the law. She didn't. She didn't even claim she did, but because she didn't like him. And she's since followed through on that promise. Is that the kind of justice you want? So there are reasons to question Letitia James's motives, to put it mildly. And those doubts become far more pronounced if you become one of the 3 living Americans who's actually read the 165-page report that she just produced on Andrew Cuomo, the report that led to his resignation today. Now, the closer you read that report, the more you are likely to notice that large portions of it are absurd. They don't make sense. On page 148, for example, Letitia James accuses Andrew Cuomo of, quote, allowing senior staff members to sit on his lap at official functions. Now, that sounds kind of creepy as hell, actually. And Letitia James clearly thought it was. She goes on to characterize lap sitting as evidence of, quote, a hostile work environment. All right. But if you go back to page 122 of the same report, you will notice this line, quote, "None of these senior staff reported feeling uncomfortable with this behavior." Oh, so they liked sitting in Andrew Cuomo's lap. Weird, but who are we to judge? Weirder things are happening right now. So how is this harassment? How is it a violation of the law? She's the Attorney General. Her job is not to pass moral judgment on the occupants of high office in New York, but to enforce the laws passed by the legislature. That's why she has the awesome power to do that, which she must not under any circumstances misuse, or else it's a threat to all of us, even those of us who loathe Andrew Cuomo. But the report, and you should read it, maybe it's irrelevant now, is full of lines like that, the kind of inconsistencies you would expect if you're reading, say, a political tract, not a legal document. But again, it doesn't matter now because the report did its job. Now the race for a new governor of New York is underway. Boy, that didn't take long. Candidates are lining up to unseat the lieutenant governor, Kathleen Hochul. She's set to take over when Cuomo is gone. Now, Letitia James is the first in line, but she's not the only one in line. Al Sharpton is in line. So is New York Mayor Bill de Blasio. They're both planning to run for governor, we read. So do you see how this works? Andrew Cuomo was an awful governor. It pains us to raise any voice in his defense. He was a vicious partisan. He was a thug. But if we're being honest, he was not completely insane. He wasn't totally untethered from reality. He acknowledged some limits to constitutional government. He wasn't, say, Letitia James. He wasn't Al Sharpton. He wasn't even, we're pausing to catch our breath here because it's so horrifying, he wasn't even Bill de Blasio, the most reckless and incompetent human being ever to hold elected office, a man who single-handedly discredits the idea of self-government. These people, just being honest, are worse than Andrew Cuomo. But because someone sat in Andrew Cuomo's lap, they may soon run the state of New York. Just so you know what's actually going on here.
Olá pessoal, tudo bem? Aqui é o Tradutor. Eu tô passando para te avisar que eu tô numa campanha para conseguir pelo menos mais 9 apoiadores até o final do ano. Esse canal não é monetizado, então totalmente depende de você. Eu preciso muito do seu apoio para manter esse canal atualizado e vivo, né, no ar. Os links para apoiar esse nosso projeto estão na descrição desse vídeo e no comentário fixado. Então é muito fácil e muito simples de apoiar. É graças a essas pessoas incríveis que eu posso estar trazendo conteúdo para vocês. E é isso aí, pessoal. Não se esqueçam de deixar seu like, seu comentário e até mais. Fui! Grande abraço.